They were the perfect newlyweds. Young, in love, and just beginning the rest of their lives. Natalie and Mark Whitaker, both 28, had boarded the Celestial Star cruise ship in the summer of 2005 for a 10-day Caribbean honeymoon. It was supposed to be a trip filled with laughter, sunsets, and champagne toasts. But just 3 days into the voyage, they vanished. No mayday, no distress call, no lifeboat missing, no witnesses, just gone. The cruise line offered their condolences. The Coast Guard searched for weeks. Their families were devastated. 1,000 questions with no answers, and no bodies to bury. 18 years later, just when the world had moved on, divers exploring a sunken vessel off the Bermuda coast discovered something chilling. A locked cabin sealed by time, and inside, 2 skeletons embracing, still dressed in honeymoon attire. DNA confirmed what no one wanted to believe. It was Natalie and Mark. But what was even more disturbing was what the divers found next. What really happened aboard the Celestial Star that night. Watch till the end to uncover the truth hidden beneath the waves. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a mystery like this. Started like any fairy tale. Natalie Rose stood on the Miami pier with her veil fluttering behind her, cheeks flushed with excitement, her hand wrapped tightly around her husband Mark's. The summer sun poured down in golden streaks as the colossal cruise liner Celestial Star loomed behind them, its white hull gleaming like a floating palace. They had only been married 5 days. "She's beautiful," Mark whispered, not referring to the ship. Natalie laughed softly and squeezed his hand. It was her dream honeymoon. 10 days drifting through Caribbean blue, waking up in new countries, dancing under moonlight. After 2 grueling years working double shifts at the pediatric unit, she finally had time to breathe. Mark had surprised her with the trip. He'd saved for months, skipping lunches, working late architecture gigs. Natalie didn't know about the cruise until the wedding night when he handed her an envelope marked, "To the woman I want to sail through life with." Inside was a boarding pass and a hand-drawn map of their route, complete with sketches of dolphins and palm trees. They were that kind of couple, thoughtful, quirky, deeply in sync. From the moment they stepped onto the Celestial Star, the world felt suspended in magic. Their suite had a balcony. Room service brought chocolate-dipped strawberries. Every photo from those first 2 days captured happiness in its purest form. Natalie in sundresses, Mark in Hawaiian shirts, arms around each other, wind in their hair. Other passengers noticed their glow. They were that couple, inseparable, giddy, totally lost in their own world. But the fairy tale ended on the night of June 10th. That evening had been beautiful. They had dinner at the captain's table, a rare honor. Natalie wore a satin lavender gown. Mark looked dapper in a navy tux. They laughed with strangers over wine, toasted to love, and danced to a string quartet playing a slow rendition of Can't Help Falling in Love. Security footage showed them leaving the ballroom just before 10:30 p.m. Natalie leaned into Mark, barefoot with her heels in hand. Mark kissed her forehead as they strolled back to their suite, cabin 943. At 10:46 p.m., they were seen entering their room. That was the last anyone ever saw of them. The next morning, their breakfast tray sat untouched outside their door. When a steward knocked, there was no answer. The Do Not Disturb sign remained for hours. Finally, by late afternoon, security entered with a spare key. The room was empty. The bed was made. Natalie's gown hung neatly on a hook. Mark's watch rested on the nightstand, still ticking. Their wallets were there, along with Natalie's favorite book, its bookmark still nestled on chapter 6. There were no signs of forced entry, no splintered locks, no blood, no broken glass. The balcony door was locked from the inside. Nothing was missing, except the newlyweds themselves. Within hours, alarms were raised. The captain made an announcement. Crew searched the decks. Lifeboats were counted. Divers scanned the water near the ship's course. The U.S. Coast Guard was notified. Helicopters scanned hundreds of square miles. Ships rerouted to assist. Mark and Natalie's faces were splashed across TV stations, newspapers, internet forums. Their families flew to Miami, Indiana, a panic. Someone must have seen something. Natalie's mother, June, cried during a press conference. They didn't just vanish. But no one had. No passengers reported screams. No neighbors on the same hallway heard a struggle. And the cameras, other than the one in the corridor, offered no clues. Days passed, then weeks. With no evidence of foul play and no sign of the couple, investigators leaned on the most tragic explanation. Accidental fall overboard. Maybe they went out on the balcony after drinking. Maybe one slipped and the other tried to save them. But there were holes in that theory. Why was the balcony door locked from the inside? Why were both their shoes inside the cabin? Why wasn't even a single piece of clothing or jewelry found in the ocean? Mark's sister, Rebecca, didn't buy it. They wouldn't be that careless, she insisted. And Natalie was afraid of heights. She wouldn't lean over a balcony rail in the middle of the night. But despite the questions, the cruise line closed the case within 6 weeks. The Celestial Star continued its voyages. Mark and Natalie's story became one of the many unsolved tragedies buried in maritime silence, until the ocean gave something back. In the spring of 2023, marine archaeologist Dr. Luis Ortega led a crew on a dive mission off the Bermuda coast. Their project, documenting shipwrecks from the early 2000s for a university study on marine decay. On the third day of scanning, their sonar picked up a large metal anomaly buried beneath coral and sand. When divers descended, their flashlights revealed the faded name etched in rusted metal. The ship had reportedly sunk in 2011 while being towed for scrapping. Most believed it was empty, but the dive team was about to discover otherwise. Inside the decaying ship, they floated past cabins turned to skeletons of luxury, soggy carpets, shattered chandeliers, seaweed growing where orchids once bloomed. Then, on deck 9, they came upon something odd. A sealed cabin door, completely intact. The metal had rusted, but the seal held. Unlike the others, IT had clearly been locked from the inside. Using underwater cutting tools, the divers broke in. What they saw froze them. A preserved suite, 2 skeletal remains embracing on the bed, tattered clothes still clinging to their frames. A dried bouquet, a rusted wedding ring on one bony finger, and on the table, a red leather journal wrapped in plastic and twine. They had found Mark and Natalie. When DNA confirmed the bodies, the story reignited across the world. News outlets ran headlines. Missing honeymooners found after 18 years. Candlelight vigils were held. Natalie's mother collapsed in tears, saying, "I just wanted to bury my baby." But the biggest question remained. How did they die? And why had their room been sealed? The journal, written by Natalie in her final hours, may hold the answer. But what it revealed wasn't just a tragedy. It was a cover-up. And someone had gone to great lengths to make sure that room was never opened again. The dive team surfaced with trembling hands. They hadn't just discovered 2 bodies. They had pulled up a story long buried by seawater, time, and silence. Inside the water-worn plastic wrap was Natalie's journal. The cover, once pink and bright, was now faded into a pale ghost of itself. But her handwriting was still legible. Looping cursive in purple ink, pressed deep into the pages like she knew one day someone would read them. And someone did. Dr. Ortega handed the journal over to the FBI, who reopened the case with the assistance of forensic specialists, cold case investigators, and analysts. When they called Natalie's mother, June Carter, to Washington, D.C., they told her gently, "Your daughter's voice was preserved." What Natalie wrote inside those pages would unravel a cover-up and expose a truth darker than anyone imagined. That was how it began. Natalie had written during the final 2 days of their lives. The entries were dated June 10th through June 12th, 2005, the very days they disappeared. She wrote by flashlight, holed up inside cabin 943. She described how it all started with something small. A knock at their door late that night. Mark answered it. A man in uniform stood there. Not cruise staff, not an officer, but someone who identified himself as security and claimed there was a problem with their onboard charges. Natalie remembered something about his badge being crooked. His eyes never quite met theirs. Still half-dressed, they followed him into the hallway, confused but compliant. He led them down a stairwell that didn't match the usual route to the guest services desk. They began to hesitate. Mark said, "This doesn't feel right." That's when the man drew a weapon. They were forced into a maintenance corridor beneath Deck 9, a level not marked on any guest map. Natalie called it the bones of the ship, where wires hung loose and pipes hissed. There, they saw something even more terrifying. Other people, at least 4 other guests. Some tied, some gagged, all frightened. Natalie never learned their names. The man in uniform spoke to someone via radio, calling them Sir. He mentioned cargo to be moved and timeline compromised. IT wasn't just about money. IT was about something else happening on board, something hidden from public view. They were shoved back into their room hours later, bruised, terrified, confused, and locked in from the outside. Mark pounded the walls. Natalie screamed. No one came. That was the first night. On June 12th, Natalie wrote her final words. She said they heard heavy movement above their cabin, boots, dragging sounds. They had run out of food. Their water was gone. Mark had torn the bed apart trying to use the frame to break open the door, but the hinges were reinforced. The walls were steel. They knew they were being left to die. In her last lines, Natalie described holding Mark's hand as they laid down in bed. Exhausted, dehydrated, defeated. "He keeps whispering that he's sorry he brought me here," she wrote. "But he gave me the happiest days of my life. If someone finds this, please tell our families we never stopped loving them. And we didn't just fall. Someone did this. Someone knew." That was the final entry. When investigators dug deeper into ship logs from 2005, they discovered shocking omissions. There were crew members listed who couldn't be accounted for, employees who had fake credentials. Records of radio calls and internal incidents from June 10th to 12th had been erased from the system before the next voyage. Then came the biggest red flag. The ship had skipped its planned dry dock inspection in 2006. According to the shipping company, electrical issues were cited, but new reports revealed that the original Celestial Star had undergone major repairs to its lower decks, particularly near Deck 9, without any documented reason. The cruise line's parent company quietly filed bankruptcy in 2008, and the Celestial Star, after sitting in storage, was being towed for scrapping in 2011, when it mysteriously sank. A whistleblower, an engineer who had worked aboard the ship, finally came forward. He admitted there were rumors among crew of a group smuggling rare diamonds, using the ship's private access passages. Natalie and Mark, he believed, had witnessed something they weren't meant to see, and were locked away to keep it quiet. The guests they saw down in the service corridors? He believes they were all liabilities, accidental witnesses. Some may have been silenced. Some may have been abandoned. But Natalie and Mark were just collateral damage. In a press conference months after the discovery, Natalie's mother, June, read a statement in front of dozens of flashing cameras. She was only 27, she said, her voice trembling. They took her smile, her future. Her father never got over it. She held up the journal with gloved hands and added, "But Natalie wrote. She made sure we'd know. And now we do." No one was ever charged. The whistleblower was granted immunity. The cruise company dissolved. The corrupt security officer was never identified by name. And the journal, though authentic, could not implicate anyone directly. A congressional committee opened an investigation into maritime disappearances, but the waters still hold more secrets than answers. Today, the Celestial Star rests like a mausoleum on the ocean floor. Divers visit it as part of an educational tour on cruise safety reform. Cabin 943 remains untouched, a shrine to two young lovers who vanished under moonlight and became the voice of a movement for transparency at sea. Natalie's wedding ring now sits in a glass case at the Maritime Memorial Museum in Florida. Mark's hand-drawn honeymoon map was returned to his sister Rebecca, who framed it with the words, "To the woman I want to sail through life with." If Natalie hadn't written that journal, if the ship hadn't sunk, if the divers hadn't chosen that day, that route, that exact angle, would their story still be buried beneath decades of salt and steel? And how many more voices, frozen in time, silenced by fear, remain hidden in the dark corners of ships that sail with secrets? Do you believe Natalie and Mark were the only ones? Or is the sea still holding more forgotten stories, just waiting for someone to listen?